Greetings, I am Scott Hayashi and I am the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Utah. And I'm speaking to you today on a very important concern, and that is the level of violence that is being done in our country, one to another, with the use of firearms. I'm speaking to you not as an advocate to take guns away from people, but rather as a person who is simply calling for a rational conversation where people from both sides of the issue can come together to find common ground. Gun violence just has to stop. It is a daily occurrence to see police cars, yellow crime tape, and yet another sad story on the news. Behind the crime tape, we must know that these are people, your neighbors. Their lives are shattered and will be forever. Long after the news reports, loved ones will be lighting candles in memory of those who had violent deaths, both by murder and an alarming rate by suicide. The latest FBI statistics tell us 51% of murders in Utah will happen by gunshot. That's 26 more candles that will be lighted. The leading cause of suicides of all races and sexes in Utah is by firearms. Utah is one of 10 states where there are more deaths by guns than by car crashes. According to the Utah Department of Health, there were 330 deaths by guns in 2012, compared to 217 motor vehicle deaths reported by the Utah Department of Transportation. It has to stop. We need to start a conversation. Again, it isn't about owning guns, it's about stopping violence. Yes, the shattered families that we see at memorial services and funerals are our neighbors, and they are us. We need to make this a conversation. At the National Cathedral, an Episcopal cathedral where the nation often gathers to mourn the deaths of our national leaders, we mourn the loss of our friends, our families, our people to gun violence. The candle is being lighted by Micah Wood of Salt Lake City. His teenage sister-in-law, Kirsten Hinckley, died, shot at point-blank range at the Trolley Square Mall shooting that still echoes through our minds.
A very violent scene at Trolley Square. Several people have been killed.
I do know that there are several at area hospitals, and there are 5 fatalities, and then the male shooters.
Well, we were cowering behind a pillar while more shots were fired.
Among the dead, Kirsten Hinckley, and among the wounded, Hinckley's mother, Carolyn Tuft.
Another one of those news reports. Another mall shooting. We see yet another photo of a beautiful person whose life ended in a moment of gun violence. That girl's mother was also shot at Trolley Square, and she held her daughter Kirsten as she died. She held a candle at the National Cathedral as our nation prayed together. Carolyn Tuft lives each day in terrible pain from 3 shotgun blasts and the pain of losing her beloved daughter.
There isn't a day that's gone by that I haven't thought about her and wondered what she'd be doing now and what she'd look like. And I miss her terribly. It's just this painful hole that never goes away.
We need to have this conversation. We need to understand that this isn't about guns, it's about people. But we need to see more than the beautiful pictures of the families and victims. We need to know the ugliness of gun violence. This is what it looks like. it's hard not to look away, but it's been easy for our legislators and lobbyists, and even ourselves, to look away from even talking about it. This is what Carolyn's x-rays show today. She still carries over 100 lead buckshot pellets in her vital organs. With her permission, we show the injuries. We do this because we need to know gun violence is as ugly as we can describe it. It must be stopped.
Yeah, I don't know where to start. I guess in the morning. The pain is what wakes me up. I wake up and my hands and feet are numb, and I don't know what causes that, and I've got a severe pain in my back where I was shot, and that spreads across, not just in the area where I was shot, but it spreads across my whole pelvic area and both hips, and it goes down my legs, and I've got nerve damage down the leg of the side that I was shot, because there was nerves that were blown out there. And then I also have pain in my hand. I was shot 3 times with a shotgun. So the back of my right arm is gone, and it shot out the ulnar nerve. So my shoulder is painful, and there's pain that goes down my arm. But my arm feels like, it's hard to describe. It's like it's frozen, as if you can imagine like holding your arm in a bucket of ice, and how that feels when it's so cold that it's frozen and painful. But it also feels like at the same time like it's on fire. So it feels like my skin is burnt, but it's frozen. It sounds crazy, I know, but that's the best way to describe it. And the fingers that are numb, it feels like they've got like clamps on the fingernail. So there's always this intense pinching on the ends of my fingers, and then the rest of them are numb. And it's just this constant, sharp, shooting, burning, freezing pain. And my lung is full of lead buckshot, so I have some problems there. And my kidneys are full of lead buckshot, so I have a lot of kidney pain and flank pain, and that all causes, I have a lot of stomach problems too, so I'm really nauseous every day.
We have started the conversation. We must continue it. Actually, polls show that most of us want an intelligent conversation about gun violence. A group of advocates, victims' families, and faith leaders have met at the governor's office. Again, it isn't a call to take guns away. It's a conversation to ask that we meet in the middle, to have reasonable regulations that prevent gun violence.
This is my daughter Kirsten's memory book.
Do you often go through it?
Yeah. I want to get it, work on the pages so I can complete it, but it's got like from the day starts with her birth certificate, actually ends, the last page is her death certificate, which is awful because it says manner of death, homicide, and that just gets to my soul.
How close is gun violence to us all? How close are we to being in the next news reports? 11 out of each 100,000 Utahns die from gun violence. And then there are those additional gun violence victims who survive. I bring to this conversation the experience of a person who has been a victim of gun violence. When I was 19 years old, I worked in a small record shop in Tacoma, Washington. And one evening, 3 men came into the store, and quickly one of them jumped up behind the counter and asked for the money in the cash register. a total of about $9. I really did not understand what was happening, and I really did not understand what he had said, at least not in that moment. I turned my head to smile at him, and he had placed the gun into my side and fired it point blank. It all happened so very quickly. In one moment I was standing, smiling. The next moment I was on the floor. And one thing that is not known about getting shot is very simply that when it happens, the body goes into shock immediately. That is to say that even though I had been shot, I had heard the gunfire of the pistol itself, I did not feel any pain. And so I really didn't know what was happening or if indeed I'd even been shot. All I knew was that I was on the floor and I had a difficult time breathing. I came through this episode after 2 months of being in the hospital. 7 weeks of that were in intensive care. I received 60 pints of blood and had 5 major surgeries. And I had a great deal of time to reflect upon my own life and the events that took place that evening. What I realized was that there was nothing I could have done to have stopped what was happening. It all happened that quickly. If I had had a gun in my possession, it would have done me absolutely no good. In fact, most likely the gun may have been used against me or stolen. Because one moment I was there standing, the next moment it was over and I was on the floor. If it had not been for friends arriving while I was on the floor, I believe that I simply would have stayed there and died. But they did arrive, and they called the hospital, and the hospital sent an ambulance and I was taken in. The recovery from that event took not only the time in the hospital, but also months and years to reflect and to pray, to talk with others about what had happened, and to come to a sense of what needed to happen in my life to be able to put things back together and move forward. And I'm not alone in this. Others who have gone through what I have gone through have experienced the same thing. And I believe that as a result of that reflection, and I believe also because the level of gun violence in our country has increased so much throughout the years, that it is time for us to have a conversation. I'm not a person who believes that anyone who owns a gun should have it taken away from him or her. I believe that most people who own firearms keep them responsibly and use them responsibly. But I do believe, and I strongly believe this, that we have reached a point in our country where the violence with the use of a gun has gotten to the point where the simple safety of many people is in jeopardy. So I call for a conversation where people can come together to discuss this, not to criticize one another or to turn it into a political stance, but to say that you and I as people living together in this country are being subjected to a level of violence which none of us had probably ever imagined would happen. And many of us, I believe, are waiting for a conversation to happen. I think if we can have a conversation where we do not label each other as either a gun-toting freak or someone that just wants to steal away guns from people, I think if we can set aside those labels, then we can come together in our common humanity as people who are concerned about safety of all of us.